Apologies, Jen. She's not here, and I mean, she would normally just defer to the heads of service to go through their reports if that's what you'd like, or whether there are just inquiries on the questions on the report itself. I wouldn't know. Robin Taylor also gives his apologies, and I wasn't intending to sort of go through this section.
Well, we have had some questions from, I asked questions of the Wagstaff and had some answers to that and Councillor Egan, which will be quite a detailed list of questions. I think other members of the committee, have you had a chance to look at both the questions and the answers? No. I think for future reference, I think it is important that the default should be the heads of service should be present. Maybe we have to have a system whereby members make it clear that they would like that, because this doesn't actually amount to much in the way of useful dialogue.
Sorry, Chairman, I apologise. David Allen, as you know, has been away for some time and has just come back this week on leave, basically. So he apologises, but clearly if there are questions that didn't come up before the meeting, we will take those back. Peter Vickers is here for his section, and again, Robin Taylor gives his apologies. They would normally all be here, yes, and take you through the report, so apologies.
Chairman, I mean, normally you would have a risk committee, so it's normally have Peter, David, and Robin, and Hugh and the other service would go to the services ONS last night, even though it's one report. That's normally the sort of division.
Yes.
So Hugh wouldn't normally come to this one, but clearly if there are any comments or concerns, we can either try and address them or take them away and get a response sent out.
I think one thing we can do immediately, if we go to page 21 of the pack, which starts with this item, the corporate performance report. There was to be a meeting of the working group to discuss the workloads between the two scrutiny committees, which in fact didn't take place. I made a suggestion by email to everyone that there was common ground between the chairs and vice chairs of each committee. Basically, the best and simplest rebalancing was to move housing completely over to this committee. There was then a comment that the communities aspect of housing delivery might be better left with the services committee, which I think both Councillor Egan and I are perfectly happy with. So I think from the June meeting, the other two aspects of housing are to be regarded as falling under this committee's remit. So if we could amend this part of the report the next time to reflect that. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be having at least 2 and I hope 3 briefings of the housing working group before the next meeting, which will help to feed into that. Right, are there any other questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for Councillor Higgins' questions and the replies, which I looked at in some considerable detail. 1 or 2 comments, if I may, please. On page 22, or page 4 of the actual report, where we have the Chief Executive's comments, I was interested in the 3rd paragraph where he describes the rollover of the new homes bonus providing an expected modest cushion for the coming year. But as I understand it, that modest cushion was £1.6 million, wasn't it?
No, we were expecting 800 and we got 1.6.
Okay, but it was still an increase of £800,000 over and above what we expected, which was the council tax increase was worth 282,000, so that was 3 or 4 times the level that we got from the increase in council tax. So I'm interested in the word modest, and when we look at page 11 of the report further on, I think there is rejoicing that they only get £100,000 for IT cyber work. from the government, and that was regarded as a major success. So I would just ask that maybe the word modest might be thought out for the future. But that's a modest concern. A more substantial concern that I have is regarding planning. In all parts of the report, whether it's complaints on page 6 or page 24 with the level 1 targets and complaint response rates, I suspect with staff turnover, or if we look at page 27 or page 9 of the report, where the planning and economic development department is 8% at variance with the approved budget. And the question then that I put in this morning was some clarification of the freedom of information requests, which are at a very high level at the moment, as we see from this report. And I was anxious to understand just the level of that, particularly with whether it's planning related matters within that. It was an overall concern, Mr. Chairman, that planning is in deep trouble. It continues to be in deep trouble. And when will it stop being in deep trouble is my question. Thank you.
Is anyone here who's going to feel particularly qualified to answer that? Okay. But I'll certainly ask Mr. Clark if he.
Yeah. I mean, Chairman. Obviously, planning falls under services, and I think O&S, and therefore those detailed questions normally come under the services O&S. But I think in terms of FOIs, I don't have the specific answers. I mean, we get a lot of FOIs in planning, we get a lot in housing as well, and we are receiving a high number of FOIs right now. In answer to your question about planning generally, we received an update today from Sally Busby and Zach on the progress made, and the backlog of validations is now cleared. It's down to 2. We are still experiencing really high levels of applications still coming in. Case officers have about 100 applications per case officer. We've got a very experienced new person starting next Monday, so we're looking always to plug the resource gaps, and we're not alone. We know we talk to the other local authorities in this area. They are all struggling with resources and rising caseload at the moment in planning. So we're still working through our improvement programme. We're making efficiencies across our processes, and we are getting there. And the new system is stabilised. I talked to some planning officers today, and they were very encouraged, speaking very encouragingly about their RISE system and how that's settled down. So I'm expecting Q4's performance to show some real increase in terms of the performance. And then as we get into Q1, we will hope to have cleared most of the backlog by then. And so, when Services Committee or this committee see Q4s and then Q1s, I'm hoping that we will have a different story to tell then.
Thank you.
If I could just come back, in the past, I've had considerable numbers of meetings with you, Graham, on the subject of planning, and I've frequently shared your optimism and sat with you and hoped, as you hoped, that the service would be improved. But it's gone on year after year after year, and it doesn't seem to. I mean, we're always expecting January around the corner, and the Jan never seems to arrive. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's the most important issue that we have for this council. Thank you.
Chair, could I just add, sorry, Sally Busby and Zach will be sending out an all councillor update email in the next couple of days on the performance.
Good, thank you.
So you should see some of the numbers behind that. So if you've got any follow-ups to that, please email back to Sally and Zach if you want to drill into that detail.
So, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. Question again associated with planning. What is our understanding as to what is driving the large number of or large increase in planning applications? Do you foresee that, or reducing at some stage, and if so, when? And associated with that is, do we need additional resources in the planning department in order to be able to meet our target performance?
So, Chairman, the increase is national. Zach, I think, put around an all-member briefing a couple of months ago now, which showed trends moving in that direction across the country, but particularly in areas, you know, that where the economy is picking up, like the southeast. I'll email Sally later on and make sure she includes a link to those national figures in her updates, just to give that context. And we are putting more resource into planning, and management board signed off a request from Zach only a month ago to strengthen some of the particular areas where we've got pressures, but we are we've lost a couple of people. You know, you'll see the figures here on recruitment generally across the council, but you know, what normally happens is when the economy picks up, the planning world tends to have a lot of movement in it. A lot of people are sat tight through the pandemic across, you know, planners, that is, the economy picks up. A lot of our private sector competitors in the job market, that is, you know, swoop and pick up staff from local authorities. And, you know, they're much more flexible with their pay packages. I mean, it all works the other way when you have a recession, and, you know, seeing that a couple of times. But that is what we're experiencing. That's a couple of good people. We've taken on a couple of good people. But generally, there's a skill shortage in planning right now, and a rising demand. So it's a perfect storm of conditions.
Thank you. Question from me, if I may. How do our planning salaries compare to other councils in the area? Are they higher, lower, comparable? We're about to benchmark again, actually, and so our benchmarking is probably a bit out of date. I mean, we still want more access to our neighbours in Guildford at the moment. We're conscious we fall behind a few. We probably compete with others, but we do need to do that exercise in the light of the pressures we're under. And Zach and Sally are going to be doing that soon with HR support. Right, thank you. Martin.
One more question, if I may. Page 27 or page 9 of the report. Please, can I just see some clarification on the presentation on part of this? Is the approved budget in the first column the full year budget? And is the variance year-to-date variance, or a variance in the quarter, or is it a projection for where we'll be at the year end?
So Chairman, it's forecast for the whole year, and so the variance is against the full year's budget. So that's the case in each quarter. Actually, even at quarter one, we, on best information at that time, we forecast an outturn compared to the full year's budget.
Okay, I just wanted to check that nothing has changed. So that's a full year projection.
Yes, that's right.
So again, a considerable concern on the planning and economic development figure, expected to be 8% over, which is quite considerable.
Chairman, in the budget that we've just set, the council agreed in February, there is a correction of the budget income in there. Actually, that's the historical budget misalignment, and that has been corrected. So that 216 variance that you see there, it's been recognised that income budget was actually unachievable, and that's been corrected in the budget the council's just agreed.
Was that, sorry, Mr. Chairman,
No,
was that because of the change of the application type that we're getting in, with very many more householder extensions and the like, and not many full large developments?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, and you know, as members will know, we lose money on planning applications. We the council taxpayer subsidises the development management process because we're not allowed to sell our own fees, and our costs are high. And actually, on the larger schemes, that's where we stand a greater chance of recovering cost than on the small ones, where you've got a charge of £200 or £300 and many thousands of pounds of staff time, you know, right the way through the chain, validation through to determination, go into the equation. So that's exactly, Councillor Martin. that change in workload, caseload, towards many more householder applications has in part driven this.
And if I may just ask one more question, where do the costs of defending appeals come? Do they find their way into that planning and economic development budget as we see it here, or is that somewhere else?
So when they're so we have a standing appeals budget that is within there. It's within the expenditure line. When we run out of that budget, an appeal comes in, we'll always go up for a supplementary estimate. So a new budget is, when new funding is created to pay for that. So not normally towards, well, quarter 3, quarter 4, if an appeal comes up and we've already used up our appeals budget at that point, we would need to come up for a supplementary estimate.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I ask just what the year-end figure for appeals in total you expect to see now?
I'm going to have to drop you a note on that, Chairman. I'm afraid I don't have that number in my head. It's within the line planning and economic development expenditure, but I don't have that item.
No, so to be clear, although we have to go through the supplementary budget procedure, the amount which is actually spent simply adds to the planning and economic development expenditure line. That is where it appears.
That's correct.
Yes.
And we would put the budget, the new budget that's created by the supplementary estimate, into the budget column as well. So the variance would be 0 on an item where we've sought a.
So you actually increased the planning income by the amount of the budget.
Not the planning income, but we increased the expenditure budget.
I appreciate that. Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Yes. Yeah.
So it is a cost, obviously, to our revenue position.
It is, yeah. So there's a base budget item. I don't have the figure, but say it's 100,000. Once we've spent that, if an appeal comes in and we need to incur costs, we come up with supplementary, and therefore our outturn might be £150,000 costs against £150,000 adjusted budget by the supplementary.
I think, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I mean, this would be where it would be very nice to see what the original budget was as approved by the council a year ago, and then what the adjusted budget is, so that we can understand the difference between the two. I think that would be a very helpful thing, because if you're constantly changing the budget, then you don't really know what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions on this item? If not, first we move on to item 8, which is the review of the corporate performance indicators for the coming year. Yeah, Louise, are you going to?
Yes, if I may, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. So KPIs are an important part of our performance management, and obviously they're an important part of your scrutiny process as well. And it was established a couple of years ago that we would try and avoid any in-year changes on KPIs for the reasons of consistency and trends and that sort of thing. So what we do is we do an annual review, and Laura Copping, our policy and performance officer, works with the heads of service who work with portfolio holders to agree or have a look at the KPI set to make sure it's still fit for purpose and is doing what we want it to do. To indicate and monitor performance. And in the report, you will see that there are some proposals for changes. You'll remember that the business transformation area has not had any KPIs in the past, and 2 new ones are being suggested here as regards the customer services team, their performance. Those are 2 new ones. In the area of finance, we've got 3 proposals to slightly diminish the target in those areas. And then we've got 3 more new ones proposed in the area of communications, both in terms of media inquiries and in social media posts. And following a query from Councillor Hegan, Robin has accepted that actually there should be a further one. Whereas the media inquiries, we've got the number and then the average time. We need to do the same thing with the social media posts. So we need another one to sort of put the context of the number of social media posts. So these are being put to you this evening for acceptance, and also to reflect on whether these are the right changes, if there's anything else you want to say about the KPI set that you're responsible for.
Okay.
I wanted to follow up the question that I put in about the customer services centre team. I wasn't totally happy with the response that I got. I understand that we're trying to encourage everything possible to be done online, and quite support that there should be feedback on that. But I do have quite a lot of first-hand experience of the frustrations of trying to use the telephone communications. And I think we very much have to pay attention to the fact that people can't do it online. Things are potentially quite complicated, maybe stressful for our residents, and that we should be measuring the drop-off rate, because people get very frustrated and give up, and we need to know if that's happening. I would say we're much, much better than the DWP, but when you sit in citizens' advice, I have sat there for 50 minutes. I have sat on the phone for 15 minutes and been cut off from Waverley Borough Council, and that is not acceptable, and we need to be measuring.
Chairman, sorry, I want me to sort of respond, because I'm kind of standing in for David, Alan, at this meeting. We do actually measure that. I mean, whilst it's not in the set here, we do have the technology, if you like, to measure that, and the customer service team do give those drop-off stats to the head of service. So it's there, and obviously whether you want to see it as a committee, whether you want to know what heads of service do with it, you know, we can sort of drill into that in a bit more detail. But we do have that facility, and we do report on the how many calls are terminated before they get out.
Okay. Well, I don't know what the rest of the committee thinks, but I think in the same way as our other performance is visible, I don't see why that shouldn't be visible.
That's just perfect.
I agree.
Yeah, I would agree with that anyway, isn't it?
Sorry, could we have one conversation at a time? Does any member of the committee have any problems with that being added to the? Good, thank you. And you've got more comments?
No, I think I was generally content with the other responses I got.
Good, thank you. I will just comment that on section 8, housing operations, which is one of our areas of interest. I spoke to a few Wagstaff today and suggested that measures KPIs HO4B and HO5B should actually be continued as reporting items for us. He assured me that they were something that were monitored and would be monitored, because it was an important measure of, if you like, actual success. And I've asked for it, because I think that for a committee like this, if we only had HO4 and HO5, these are slightly unclear numbers. Are tenants generally happy or unhappy? And whereas I think most of us have heard of the issues of some tenants who've waited for a long time to get repairs completed. So I think these are hard numbers, if you like, which will enable us to see quite quickly whether or not things are working well, or whether there is attention needed. Is the committee happy with the retention of those two measures?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Apart from that, I too am pretty happy. Councillor Martin.
Could I just ask a question, please, regarding page 3 or page 75 of the committee papers? This is the finance and property policy MOS section 3.1 proposal, focused on particularly on F1 and F2. As long as I've been a member of this council, we've had 99% as the target for council tax and the collection of non-domestic rates. I'm rather sad to see that dropped back to 98%. We can get into a long discussion about whether we should have aspirational targets or achievable targets, and we could wait until the cows come home if we wanted to discuss that one. But I'm just a little bit reluctant to take that figure down from a 99%. And usually we get to a figure in the 98s, and 98.8 has been quite a frequent achievement over the last few years. I wonder what other members of the committee feel, or whether we perhaps should propose that we take it maybe up to 98.5 rather than dropping all the way down to 98%. The second part of that question is, when we don't collect the council tax and the non-business, non-domestic rates, business rates, what happens? Do we lose that revenue? I mean, is that then shared across all the authorities? That's lost money, is it? Thank you.
Officers, Peter.
Sure, Chair. So answer in reverse then. So this is the in-year collection rate. So effectively, what isn't collected goes on the balance sheet as debt, and we carry on pursuing. So usually it's particularly on business rates, it's particularly difficult cases.
So can you speak up? I'm getting
Particularly on business rates, when we're putting something on the balance sheet that's not collected in year, it's usually because there's a particular issue with a business, and there's some history there, and it just takes longer to collect the money. It doesn't mean we've lost it. We still pursue it. We literally have just brought back in house our debt service to pursue debt in line with the actions we took through the pandemic, where we bolstered our recovery, because the courts were closed and businesses and council taxpayers were struggling, and we had to ramp up the efforts to work with everyone. But effectively, the answer is it goes in the balance sheet and we still collect, we still pursue it. We only write something off when we get to the point where it's just not economical to collect anymore. Otherwise, we do pursue debt. The money goes into the collection fund if it's council tax, and it is shared with the preceptors. So this is where the adjustments come through the collection fund in future years. So it's currently a precept plus surplus or deficit on collection, or falls into that.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may then understand, the question of setting a target, why would we want to take it down from 99 to 98?
So on council tax, on the council tax base has been set at 98% as part of the calculation. And that's purely reflecting the realities of where we are today, up there in the borough with council taxpayers. So we have to be realistic about this. So by all means, we can set it at 99%, and we pursue as much as we can, but we follow our procedures in terms of debt recovery. We work with the taxpayers across the borough. Forcing them through the courts isn't our first recourse. We do try to work with people. So we're just reflecting reality, saying 98%. You're right, we're usually in that ballpark. The last couple of years through the pandemic, we're slightly lower than that. We've seen in the last 6 months that figure ramping up again. So the collection rates have improved, which does indicate that by and large people are getting over the rump of the difficulties. But by no means it isn't over. There are people out there struggling still.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I understand. I think I'd be happy with that change for this year, but I would just like to note or request that we put it back to 99% just as soon as we can. I think the figure of 99% is a figure we've held on to for a very long time, and I wouldn't want to see any reduction in our efforts. I do recognise the particular issues we have right now, but I think we should be putting it up to 99% again as soon as we can.
Right. I mean, one thing I think we should note is that there has been an adjustment upwards of the targets for council tax in F1 to reflect the fact that this is collected on a 10 months out of 12 basis, well, evenly. Whereas business rates is actually, it seems, an even collection throughout the year.
Chairman, most businesses pay over 12 months. Actually, most households still pay over 10, even though they can pay over 12. And that's the reality, that those two council tax 3 months is still attractive to people, even though they could spread over 12 if they wanted to. That's the reality.
I didn't know that one could.
And when one tries, one doesn't get the right information.
It came in about 4 years ago, that you could spread your council taxpayers could spread the instalments over 12 months. nearly everyone stayed to 10.
Mr. Chairman, that's today's useless piece of information.
I think it just demonstrates that inertia is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. So, and is there any sort of interest charge for spreading it over? So nice.
No, right.
There's no response when you try to do it.
I'm interested. Right, are there any other questions on this item? If not, thank you for that. We'll move on to item 9, collaboration with Guildford update. As it follows is here to give us something brief until the
Oh, very much brief. Thank you, Chair. I'll provide a very short update and happy to take any questions at your discretion, of course. Since Council gave authorisation to proceed to the next stage of the collaboration, the Joint Chief Executive being the first one of those, the first stage of that, a number of actions that were also authorised by that meeting have now commenced. So the convening of the Inter-Authority Working Group, which is most Fridays since the beginning of the year for a number of weeks, of which I'm a member, and of course Mr. Chairman is also a member, alongside officers and members from Guildford and Waverley. The purpose of that group is to draft the heads of terms for the Inter-Authority Agreement, and that's been done section by section each week. And we've now got a full draft set of heads of terms that will hopefully be given approval to recommend to Council on Friday. The Inter-Authority Group has also constructed and reviewed the risk register for the project and has drafted governance arrangements for the ongoing review of the Inter-Authority Agreement and that register, and can also bring in other things to its capacity over time as and when it needs to. And finally, stage 2 of the staffing side has begun with the Joint Chief Executive working on the organisational design of the senior management level, with obviously the timing of this aligned to coincide with the Inter-Authority Agreement, hopefully being agreed by Council and following through the process that it sets out. That's all the update I've got, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item 10, and this is the corporate objectives, and we have Councillor Penny Marriott, who is the portfolio holder for present to comment and to answer questions, and also there's an officer available to read. So to decide who wants to do it.
Just like to just give you some background as to what, in a lot of ways, what this isn't. Because it isn't a set of rules which you have to follow, or because in fact, if you look at them, they'd be very difficult to follow exactly. It's to change, to improve and make sure that what we present to our service, the people we provide a service to, the best possible set of service, so we don't actually discriminate against them, or but that is only part of it. It's to change the original Equalities Act was put forward to mean no discrimination or little discrimination, or to improve on the discrimination that there was at the time. And as part of the Equalities Act, you have to produce a policy with some objectives and an action plan of how you expect those objectives to be achieved. And so if you look at what the Equalities Act says, it says a huge range of things: actively promote diversity, equal opportunities regardless of age, race, disability, religion, sex, pregnancy, maternity, sexual orientation, marriage and civil partnerships, gender reassignment, income and wealth, upholding the provisions of the Act. Now that's an awful lot for one little policy to do. So, and that is to make you non-discriminatory. So basically, the whole of this new policy objective is to be more ambitious, to make sure that you do that, but you are aiming for something which provides provides a climate in which people who feel they are discriminated against can actually report to somebody who will do something about it, and also that they can challenge the behaviour and believe that something will happen. basically. And though part of what we put in here as part of the more ambitious thing, actively welcome into Waverley were citizens suffering from war and repression. We didn't actually know at the time that that was going to become something rather large. Now if you look at the
Could I actually just?
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm reading this with interest, but
yeah,
is this aimed at, if you like, preventing discrimination by Waverley staff to one another, and
No,
also by Waverley staff to our customers? Is it that which you're?
well, it's a Waverley policy, which means it's within the staff, within the officers, and within the councillors, and therefore how they deal with the public. So it's within internally, and that actually has good outcomes in that the staff generally therefore feel more appreciated and more part. That's the diversity and inclusion. You can have a more diverse staff and they feel more included. And in fact, I think I'd like to say thank you very much to Louise and the Corporate Equality Group, who have actually looked at this so far. And a lot of this comes from what the Equality Group have put forward. And it is aimed to improve services, because, and that sort of happened today, which was really a very nice thing. We were thinking of a policy, and there was a very good equality impact assessment, fantastic, using the new equality impact assessment form, which pointed out that something which they hadn't thought of, that it would actually impact on, in this case, the young, more than most other people. So they went back and looked at it and sort of built it into the policy in that case. So it is designed to improve everything.
So it's both internal and external.
Internal, well, more how it will deal with external, I think.
So there, may I just qualify that as well? So the equality objectives are sort of focused on the council as an employer. So there's a raft of stuff in terms of recruitment. The council as a community leader, to sort of make sure that our communities are cohesive, and also as a customer, as a service provider. So we must make sure that the way Councillor Hegan made the point a few minutes ago about online services. You know, we cannot disregard those people who cannot get online. So it is making sure that our services are provided in an accessible way, and that we don't discriminate.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. In terms of the document, I have a number of points. I was wondering whether it was more helpful if I set them to Louise afterwards. It's just, I think that if you're going to have a document like this, it would be very good if it applied equality in terms of grammatical expression, using the same approach everywhere and not hopping around. And I'm afraid I'm old-fashioned, but religious toleration of all religions, beliefs, and none strikes me as slightly. It's not only the wrong grammar; it should just be tolerance of all religions, beliefs, and none. It's that sort of thing, which I don't think want to waste time for this committee on now. But if I may send you my
oh yes,
editorial
There
suggestions, I'm happy to do so.
Yes, there is a reason it's expressed like that, because beliefs are in the act, and humanists do not regard themselves as having a religion, but they believe that they have a belief.
Quite. Those three things are the three possibilities. Well, members, other questions for either Louise or Penny and Councillor Martin?
Thank you. The last time that this was looked at was 2012, according to the report. I did go onto the Waverley website and picked up till half a page. Is that it?
That's what it began.
I mean,
Yes.
so it would have been actually quite useful to put it into the report, saying, you know, in the report we've got, saying, hey, this is what we had before. So if this is going further, it might be useful to put it in rather than have to go hunting on the there. And you're right. It's it's short and punctilious, and I guess to the point. But I do support what we're trying to do here to be much more specific. embracing. And so I'm generally happy with the report. The only thing that occurs to me is when I look at page 92 and the engagement process, and item 4.3 talks about continuing to monitor and taking action to narrow the gender pay gap. But when we go back to what we're trying to promote is gender equality and neutrality, so we ought not to be looking at such things because we've said we're invisible to gender. So how do we square that circle?
I wish we were.
Yeah.
Councillor, but the reality is there is a gender pay gap, and we have statutory to monitor it, and we have to produce figures each year and publish them, and we have to work towards narrowing that. And not only a gender pay gap, but a disability pay gap as well is also very.
But we're supposed to be gender neutral.
How does
We're not supposed to look at these things.
Of all places, a local authority would be the one that you would expect it to be absent. So how come? You should think that.
I think partly with local authorities, a lot of the lower paid jobs are, women are employed in a lot of the lower paid jobs. This is particularly the case for the county, the social services, the sort of the people who work in social services. We will have our own particular context, and at Waverley, as you know, at the higher end, most of the heads of service, oh no, all of them are men. We have one female director, so there is a context, and we're very aware of it, and as are the senior managers aware of this, and we do talk about it at various instances. But you know, it is part of the recruitment, and it is looked at.
Sorry, I mean, if let's say one of the heads of services left and a woman was appointed, is there any reason to think she wouldn't be paid the same as the person she was replacing?
Now,
I sincerely hope not.
It wouldn't be now.
No.
Sorry, if I may,
No.
Mr. Chair, if that were happening now, it would not be. But a lot of this is quite legacy, and a lot of it is because of the length of time and service of individual officers. So it's not something that is corrected as frequently as you might expect.
But I think it's right that the government makes it statutory responsibility that we publish these details, because otherwise we wouldn't know, we wouldn't think about it. So, you know, until it's there, it's like your performance indicators. Until you know that planning performance has dipped again, we just wouldn't know about it. So it's bringing it into the open, which is a good thing.
I just wanted to question the section which talks in terms of recruitment, which is basically blind recruitment. So you don't know at the time that you call candidates forward, well, what their gender is, for want of a better example. So you can actually, by following one part of the policy, potentially perpetuate issues in other parts of the policy. Is that my reading of it?
I suppose, yes, there's a natural prerogative of that would be yes. But recruitment, so I mean, I think what employers have found in the past is that however much you try and get rid of unconscious bias, it still remains. You know, look at, you know, whether you see someone with a foreign name, you know, that's, you know, and then you sort of immediately make assumptions on that, or they won't have English or whatever, irrespective of the actual candidate and their abilities. So that's why it's coming in more and more. But I take your point. But having said that, the best candidate has to be given the job, irrespective of gender or, you know, so certainly, yeah. Then we can't positively discriminate. We're not allowed to.
Yes,
We want to.
right. Well, thank you for that. Are there any other questions from members on this thing? No, Penny, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for that.
It's very welcome to say, and it gets even.
Yes, can I just say one other thing, that I would actually welcome anything that you think that would improve this, because it has already been through the corporate group. It has already been through the executive, so I would like to get some.
Well, I'm quite serious. I have actually. I'm afraid I can't restrain myself from correcting people's text. And I just spent 2 years on the golf cricket rules, and the habit dies hard. I just think documents like like this are at their most effective if they're easy to read.
Mm.
And I do find it uncomfortable when tenses change or approaches change. It'd be very nice if they were all uniform and they would flow. But
Well, thank you.
I'll send
Very
it
nice
to
if the legislation was.
Louise with a copy to you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Right, we have now reached the stage in the
Excuse me, everybody.
agenda which every chairman rejoices in, which is the exclusion of press and public. And we are still required to read out the formal motion for your consideration. That pursuant to Procedure Rule 20, in accordance with Section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items on the grounds that it is unlikely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted, or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during the items, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined by Section 100I of the Act, of the description specified in the appropriate paragraphs of the revised Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Act. And these are commercial matters involving